Okay, so at the ARC Minnesota, we have what's called a help desk. And that's where people call in and really are with issues, with questions, anything like that. And one of the main areas that we get tons of calls is around a lack of, I'm going to use it, lack of communication, and needing to strengthen that and problem solving. So the first scenario that I've used Trying Life Course a lot is a person feels like they're not being heard. Systems are being centered rather than the person, and as we know, that's really what person-centered tools is all about, is really centering the system and making sure that it's fitting the person, and they're not having to fit into a box. And so one thing that I've done, or what I typically lean on for this, is doing the trajectory for exploring. And why I use a trajectory for exploring rather than planning, you definitely could use planning, but really to make sure that the person is really outlining the big picture. What is this all for? What are their hopes and dreams? What are things that they don't want? And even, there's areas in the trajectory for exploring to talk about what currently is happening. And then typically what happens is this is shared with their case manager or any other professionals, support staff that they're working with to try to reflect on if things are currently in place to reflect that bigger picture. Is it leading them to the place that they want to go, or is it leading to where they don't want to go? And a lot of times, when someone isn't being heard, it's leading to where they don't want to go. And so, unfortunately, with a person feeling not being heard, sometimes there's having to bring it up again. Hopefully, it's one meeting where, hey, this has been an issue that this person is experiencing. And we really want this opportunity to, just to share what their hopes and goals are and to make sure that everyone is on the same page moving forward. So almost, if you kind of think about it, I really think that this kind of trajectory for exploring is kind of almost a mini person-centered planning session. So that you might be outlining goals, but it's really just making sure that that everyone's on the same page. And it can come back to that over and over, but just so that everyone has a copy and really making sure that they're aligning it with what the person what they want in their life. I typically do recommend people use the vault, especially if they are working with a team. So for Disability Hub, people might be familiar with My Vault, where people can share different files with different people on their team, parents, friends, anyone who they invite. And so people can kind of have that trajectory for exploring as a file and upload it to their My Vault. And that way, again, it's always being the center. What the person is wanting is always the center. The next one is a regular occurrence. A person can't get a hold of their case manager. They have tried emails and phone calls, and it's weeks of radio silence. Sometimes the situation is that a case manager has moved on and they were never notified, or they just have not established communication. So for this, one thing that I've done is a trajectory for planning. So why I use a trajectory for planning is the people or the family that I worked with was really looking at what was positive case management that they've had in the past, or even positive professional, what was positive communication. And then on the flip side of that, looking in their history of what was negative communication, how was those negative experiencing leading to where they don't want to go, and then even currently highlighting things that are going well. Maybe the case management is really knowledgeable, they have courses, so kind of really highlighting those different things, but then again pointing out things that are not working with the types of the relationship they currently have with that professional. And then moving forward, like, what is the ideal case management relationship look like? What type of support would they need? What type of communication? And then what do they not want from a case manager? So a lot of times, obviously, it's not hearing back from them for weeks. I will say for this one, actually for all of these, I do pair a lot of Charting Life course tools with other person-centered tools. So for this specific scenario, when it comes to problem solving or clarifying things, I use the donut, which looks at what is someone's core responsibilities, where can they get creative, and then what's out of their scope. Because a lot of times what can happen, I think, when there's this conflict that occurs, it's from not laying out what a person needs and then really being transparent around, actually this falls outside of my case management responsibilities. This would actually fall in someone else's role or on as your responsibility. So really looking at bringing out the community-based service manual and looking at what are the case manager's responsibilities and making sure that people are on the same page, and then outlining what does communication look like moving forward. What is a reasonable request? The case manager may, I'm not able to get back to you within a day. That's just something I'm not able to do, but I can get to you in 5 business days, right? So the tool can really be used to, one, explain the frustrations, where they've been, what they want, and then opening up the door to problem solving with some other tools and just conversation. The next one is a person has had 4 case managers in a year. This is, again, another occurrence that happens a lot. And this one, I typically work with people to create the portfolio. So that includes the trajectory, the integrated support star, and the one-page profile. Obviously, this is not a situation or scenario that we want anyone to be in, but it can be a reality currently that people are experiencing. And so really it's equipping them with the tools to ensure that when they do get a new case manager, that they aren't just looking at maybe the system paperwork, that they really are getting to know the person. And for the trajectory, for especially getting to know people, I do use a trajectory for planning, just because I think it's really important for people to understand where a person has been, to understand where they're going. And so that can really be a way. So right when they get a new case manager, hopefully they're notified. And this is the first thing, in their first meeting that they're going over and talking about the trajectory or the integrated support star and what kind of resources and services, all those different kind of a holistic approach that they currently have in place. And then that one-page profile really outlining like what do they need, what's important to them, what do people like and admire, and how to best support them. So maybe someone needs help reading, would like a phone call instead of emails because they have a better way of processing that information, right? So just making sure that people can have that information. And so there's not this delayed support in getting to know someone. So it's right all out there from the very beginning. You can go to the next slide. The next big area of individuality for me, and again, at the ARC Minnesota, we do have like different expertise, and future planning is, I would say, one of my other roles at the ARC Minnesota was doing our Future Life Options program, which we don't have anymore, but that was around supporting parents plan for what will happen when they're unable to care for their child. And then also I was a person-centered planner. And so these are great tools. There's so many tools to be using for this. So the first one, obviously, we've talked about this a lot for our in Minnesota Connect group, but transitioning from school into adulthood, there's a lot of tools that can be used. I specifically like to use their trajectory for planning, again, to kind of think about what were components of school life that were really important to the person or negative to the person, what's currently happening in their life, and then what's the vision? What do they want adulthood to look like, or maybe it's employment or the rhythm, their routine, who they're around. I think a lot of times one big theme that I've talked a lot about with parents in this age is the familiarity that people really miss when they leave school. And people seeing the same people in the halls and people knowing their names and that feel of community. And so looking at like where are you going to get that? Are you going to become a regular at a coffee shop or a bar or the same grocery store? How are you going to build that familiarity so that isolation and loneliness doesn't happen? So I think that can be a really helpful thing to look at, kind of, again, the positive components and then moving forward. I think for this trajectory for planning, we've also used the domains. And so for each one, a trajectory for planning. So maybe it's employment, it's for health, because there are just so many things to kind of break down and plan when someone is transitioning from school. So really thinking about those different components in an intentional way, and breaking them down. And then the other thing that I've done with this one, especially because it's kind of, again, that person-centered planning light, is using visuals. So I've brought magazines or I've printed tons of stock images and used the trajectory for exploring. So it's more just what do I want and don't want. And especially if someone connects more with images or doesn't use words to communicate, that way they are able to still communicate to whoever is in their life as they're transitioning from school what it is that they want. Obviously, like I said, a lot of my expertise is in that future planning, specifically for family members, and the trajectory for exploring, we have used for expressing wishes, when someone after they pass. So that's called a letter of intent. A letter of intent kind of writes out, this is what I intend for the person. This is my hopes for them. I would love this person to care, and this is what I want their life to look like. And our trajectory for exploring can really help people kind of brainstorm these ideas of, and making sure that these wishes, or the life that they really have created and help support with this person, is documented. So whoever is next in line, in a caregiving or family or friends, whatever role, really understands kind of what that life has looked like and what they want it to continue as. The next is domains I've used for what care looks like in different areas. And I think this can also, not only for people who are aging, but I think this could be used for transitioning from school, as well as if someone is struggling with care, or support, especially maybe paid support. Looking at what does care look like, be it health, be it friendship. Does someone need prompts? Does someone need rides somewhere? And looking at these different ways and the different domains and where someone needs support, you can help someone think about, okay, well, where could this another person fit in? Or where can you start providing more education or support so that they're learning these skills? How do you pass this on to others, and build a wider network of support? And then lastly, mapping relationship does that, but it is a little more general because it's kind of looking at, financial and the different areas. How does someone who's going to be caring for and about the person? But the reason I really like this one is looking at who is doing it now. And most of the time with the families I'm working with, it's mom and dad are the main components. And then who could possibly be taking over that different role. And then the last major piece being a plan of action. What are you going to do? Are you going to invite them over for dinner? Are you going to reach out and just share that you've been thinking about the future, right? So it helps people kind of move into action. And then we'll go to the next slide. Self-advocacy. A child received a new diagnosis. Honestly, we also get a lot of calls from adults who have received a new diagnosis and are unsure about what that means. And I think a lot of times for me, what's important about this, first around this conversation is like, what does it mean to you? And first kind of having that conversation about how it's sitting with them and how it's possibly been affecting their life or what it looks like right now. Oh, I didn't even finish the sentence. I'm so sorry. Can make sure that Trajectory, sometimes my thoughts like go too fast. So trajectory for exploring, I use this one a lot when someone is, this could also, even if you think about it, like a life transition. And so a lot of times people might get caught up in what a diagnosis might mean. Maybe they've, from doctors or people telling them, or they've read certain things, what it means. And so I think for me, when I've worked with people on this, the trajectory for exploring can still bring them back to, okay, what do you want for your life? What do you want and what do you not want? Because then, even with a diagnosis, how do we get you to where you want and what you don't want, right? Whatever that diagnosis may be, how do we make sure you have the supports and services, the information, the network, the peer support to move forward with a life that you want? And then the next thing I do with them is the integrated support star, to go through kind of what are the resources, what are their options, so that they feel like they have something, basically information to move forward with. So again, peer support, I think, is a really, especially with a new diagnosis, making sure that people, they're linked with, if it's parents, if it's other peers with disabilities, to make sure that they have that community to support and understand what that new diagnosis means for them. Or again, understanding if they're needing more supports, what county services are available to them, technology, things in the community that can support. And then lastly, a big one, at the ARC Minnesota, we have the peer-to-peer mentor, which is working with individuals moving from, sub-minimum wage to competitive integrated employment. And so we do get calls on a person transitioning from a day program to competitive integrated employment. And the trajectory for planning is something that can be really helpful for that, because it's looking at what are similar to kind of how I talked about transitioning out of school. It's looking at what were the components that were positive, negative in that environment that need to continue, either ways that you were supported, people, how the environment was even set up, the rhythm, the routines, what were positive and what were negatives. And so that way, moving forward, the people who are supporting the person themselves, they can really think about, okay, what are components that we can try to weave in to competitive integrated employment? What services can we pull from to make sure that you're still having someone who can give you prompts, or that you have a to-do list, right? So kind of thinking about how you are pulling components of the past into the future, especially with those goals. I think, is that all that I have? Next slide.
There we go. All right. Pick up how to mute myself. So thanks, Nora, for sharing that. It's really interesting to hear how you're using it. Jamie, if you would like to share how Family Voices is using Charting the Life Course, that'd be great. And I will advance the slide. Just let me know when you want me to move to the next one.
Sure. Are we going to save our questions for Nora until the end?
Yeah, let's do that. We'll just have a big discussion about at the end.
And then you'll want to change the spotlight to Jamie. I think I'm still spotlighted.
Okay.
But your lighting's so much nicer, Nora.
Let's see. We will. There we go. I think you're pinned, and I need to. Oh my gosh. I usually do Zoom on two screens. So I'm on one screen today, and
you're doing great.
Let's see, got to figure out how to get the slides back. I need to.
So we can see them. I think you're just.
I don't think that the thing is,
retrieving them on your screen.
They won't. Yeah, you can start talking, and I'll move. I'll catch up with you.
That sounds good. And I apologize. I obviously made the writing too small on this slide, but I just wanted to take a quick second for anyone who maybe hasn't heard of Family Voices of Minnesota, just to say that we're a nonprofit family-run organization here in Minnesota that are supporting families who are raising children with any type of disability or special health care need. And that we're the state affiliate organization for Family Voices National and the state member of Parent to Parent USA. You can, next slide if you got them there, Linda. I also want to say thank you to Nora for sharing all of that. I always love hearing how other people are using Charting the Life course. And Nora, you always seem very excited to talk about it. And so that enthusiasm is kind of contagious. So thank you. As a background, at Family Voices of Minnesota back in 2020, we had an ambassador series for staff and some of our parent volunteers. And in 2021, a couple of us also got to join a second ambassador cohort through DHS, the Minnesota Connecting Families cohort. And then a couple of us on staff also got the presenters badge back in 2022. And I got to participate in a series. Well, no, the entire staff participated in the Good Life Group facilitator badge. And then we are currently a part of the Minnesota Connect, which is putting the Charting the Life course in action series together as well. But I just wanted to give that as a background for why I'm here today and what brings us to the work that we're doing with Charting the Life course. Next slide. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight over the past year and also coming up this spring are that we've been using Charting the Life course to run what are called Good Life groups. So these are interactive peer learning collaboratives, and we are using them with small groups of parents who are, again, raising children with disabilities here in Minnesota. These groups have been 10 people or less. We obviously want to reach a wide audience, but we also find that in small groups like that, there's this opportunity to really support one another and build relationships and create, a confidential and trusting environment where people are really feeling open to explore these tools and have conversations about their families and their hopes and dreams for the future for their children and some of the challenges that they're facing. So I've been very pleased with the environment that we've been able to create. This is happening virtually over Zoom, and then the sessions run a total of 4 to 5 hours, split up. The ones that we did this last year were split up into 2 sessions each. And so that first session was really about getting to know each other, learning where people are in their life course journey. And a lot of people are brand new to it. And so then teaching or sharing sort of the life course thinking and the concepts and tools and the core belief, and then taking an opportunity to really focus on one particular tool or theme or topic, and then giving participants a chance to practice before we come back for that second session and share what we've learned, and if they're comfortable with it, the activity that they did and the outcome. So we're really excited. I know I personally am super excited to see families using tools like this. We work and advocate a lot in sort of deficit-based systems and thinking. And any time that we can empower ourselves by really getting at the core of what our families' needs are and what our and be able to communicate that really clearly, then we really can help ourselves and other families be effective advocates. So again, another plug that we will have 2 more Good Life Group cohorts coming up this spring. I also wanted to add that as part of our Charting the Life Course journey, we did start a Charting the Life Course page on our website. It's a pretty simple page. We have the star, the trajectory, and the all about me. And then we have a couple of video clips of webinars that we've done, and then 2 recordings from the Minnesota Connect group on that page as well. And that's where you can check back to hear about more Good Life groups. You can also email me if you're today, if you're interested in hearing when those hit the calendar soon. Next slide, please. Some of the other places that we've been integrating Charting the Life Course is in our trainings and presentations. Over the fall, we got to present at the Minnesota school-based OT-PT Institute. And so we did a session where we talked about the value of peer support in our specific program and organization. And then we spent the second half of that talking about Charting the Life Course and how using those tools, what's happening in Minnesota with Charting the Life Course, but then drilling down to an individual level, what happens when families and school teams use those tools together. We just brought in an established dads group, so a group of dads that are raising kids with disabilities. We brought them under our umbrella of other support groups and did a facilitator training and brought in the trajectory tool in the very beginning of that training because they were an established group and we wanted to really kind of honor their legacy. And so we wanted that training to be based on what they were imagining their support group would be. And so we brought in a trajectory and did that as an activity to kick off this training and guide the training. And then just a couple of other examples are that we had a training with PACER in October, and then it extended into November because we kind of wanted to talk more about Charting the Life Course. So three of the staff members from PACER and 4, I believe, from Family Voices of Minnesota, just sharing what we know and what we've been doing with Charting the Life Course and what's going on with it in Minnesota with that staff, and trying to make that connection so that more professionals and families have access. And then just because this was fresh on my mind, I did a program presentation with for a group of families at a clinic called Partners in Excellence. And anytime now that I get an opportunity to be in front of a group of parents, and in this case, parents of early childhood age children, I just want to encourage them so much to use some type of person-centered framework. And I've been where they are, and I think that it's so empowering to learn early how to think and talk about our children having life experiences and the dignity of risk piece. And so had an opportunity and took it to tack on 15 minutes of Charting the Life Course and what we've done with it and some samples of that. Next slide. So just as we're looking ahead, those Good Life groups that I mentioned before are coming up this spring. My colleague Luz and I are currently collaborating on doing a Charting the Life Course training for our Spanish-speaking families that have been getting support from one another. A lot of things are already translated, and we're just working together to organize that. So that'll be coming up, I think, in the late spring. And then, similar to what Nora was saying, our executive director, has been talking about how can we integrate this more into our day-to-day conversations with families, which we already do, but how can we make that more of a protocol? And so I'll be interested to continue learning from you, Nora, on that. Next slide. And that's it. Just please feel free to reach out if it ever serves, and I look forward to our discussion.
Turn myself off mute. All right. Thank you, Jamie. So I need to stop sharing. We'll start with just general questions if you have of Nora or Jamie about how their organizations or them personally are using Charting the Life Course in their work. We'll just start with that. Just go ahead. We're a pretty small group, so if you just want to ask your question, that's fine. Otherwise, raise your hand on the virtually or in real life, and we'll call on you. So, questions for Nora or Jamie?
Hey, Nora, I had one brewing. When you were talking about using the trajectory for someone who was not getting communications back from their case manager, I kind of wanted to hear what the outcome of that was, like where the trajectory sent them and what happened next.
It actually was really positive because I think what can happen, it just opened the door for the conversation around. I think it can be easier to start with kind of this personal, this is where we're coming from, this is our experience, and this is what happened. But then it did help with opening the door of what are the roles and responsibilities of this case manager. I won't say names of the provider. They did decide to change providers of case management, because again, it was contracted, to an agency that was more specific to working with people with an IDD diagnosis. And the one that they were working with had like almost no knowledge of the resources, the information. And from really kind of going into what was positive about case management or even just professionals in the past was familiarity with agencies and organizations and resources and information and that type of support. And it was really like, once they kind of clarified that, this agency basically really was not able to provide that because they didn't have the training, the expertise or anything. So I think it really helped them clarify, oh, we need to find someone else who can support us in the way that we want. So that's why I think that plan too can be just like really helpful. It helps you be like, oh, I'm not getting what I need here. I need to do something else.
Thanks, Nora. Any other questions? Otherwise, we have questions. So, no? Okay. Well, I have a question for Nora and Jamie. So, what are your recommendations for incorporating the framework into people's practice and organizations?
So when we started planning with my colleague for the next training, one of the things that I feel like has served me well is using these day to day. So keeping a printout or, and having a scenario come up either personally or professionally, and using a star or trajectory to jot notes on, because then you feel the simplicity of it, right? Sometimes when you say worksheet or tool, it feels like a big project.
Yep. Yep.
And so I would just have stuff around and I would take opportunities to use them. And maybe Nora has some other less simple ideas about that.
No, Jamie, I totally agree. I think practice really helps with that familiarity. I started using it. I know we did this with like during the ambassador series, you were able to use the tools on yourself, on your own life. But continuing to do that, like using them for professionally where I want to be going, for my work plan. I asked my supervisors, hey, the work plan's coming up, reviewing that. Can we use the trajectory to figure out what we want for our team and what we don't want? So even volunteering, like the tools to support the organization. So I really think it's just been practice. And the more I did it with myself, I felt like I could support like other people doing it. But I feel like if I hadn't done it with myself first, or I asked my sister, my sister was needing like some guidance in life. So I even, helped my sister do one. And so I think doing it outside of even just work life can be helpful.
I love your example, Nora, about using like person-centered thinking and charting the life course, about using the donut for roles. And I'm wondering if anyone else has examples on how they've like used in conjunction or alignment, or maybe you have other examples, Nora, because I do think that's really key, because some folks are really well trained in person-centered thinking, and then they're like, but they don't see how they can work together always. And I'm always looking for, that's a great example, and I'm probably going to steal it. And I always use a different example, but I'm wondering if anybody has other ways they use them together.
I use them together daily. That's my whole life. That's my whole work. All the time. I might be planning with someone and use the communication chart, and pair that with the integrated star, or oftentimes I pair the communication chart with decision making, because we have to know how to communicate to them and how they communicate with us before we can plan, before we can be supportive in decision making. So I use them all the time. I'm a trauma-informed support trainer, and the trauma-informed supports training that I do is a combination of the person-centered thinking tools and the charting the life course tools throughout pretty much the whole training. I think we are practitioners of person-centered practices, and that the more practices we know, the more we can support individuals and families, and influence systems to support individuals and families.
Thanks, Lori. So I'm going to open up, I'm going to ask questions of everybody. So some of you are really new to this, so I just want you to think ahead a little bit, and then people who have some experience can also think about how the overcoming part. So what do you see might be potential challenges to implementing charting the life course in your practice, in your organization? And for those of you who have been further down the road, how did you overcome them and give the folks who are starting out on this journey some pointers? You're muted, Lori.
I haven't had any trouble implementing and integrating it into my organization. I think where the stumbling block seems to be is other people who not having a basic foundation or knowledge. And we'll use the star, for example. So when you talk about how you can support someone, their thinking at the point where they're at always goes to eligibility-based services. We can't take so-and-so to the Y because we don't have any staff. our staffing ratio is 1-4. So a lot of it is helping other people on the team to advance their thinking and see how they can. There are other ways. Eligibility services might be one of them, but there are other things that we can do to help somebody and support somebody. So I think that's the stumbling block that I encounter.
Thank you, Lori. Any other thoughts for people?
This is not a challenge. Oh, so thank you. This is not a challenges that I identify, but I was thinking, organizations and practitioners discuss some of the challenges of the individuals and families, and what they want, and then they may identify certain steps as the next steps. But then I wonder if the Charting the Life course, Nora or Jamie or others, have you used it follow along support? So making sure if those next steps are, carried by identified person who is in charge. I was just wondering, those kind of steps are considered in the process. Because I discuss everything, but then we want to see some of those changes in action. So I wonder if you have any, experiences or any steps that you've been working with the individuals and the family to see those changes.
I think for me, and Katie and I have had conversations about this, like with Charting the Life course and with person-centered tools, all these things, like it depends, right? And for some people that I work with individual advocacy, they've contacted me, we've had a meeting, and they're off, right? And then some, we build a relationship and I'm more in contact with them, and they check back in with me and I hear how things are going, right? So there's that follow-up. Sometimes we get calls that are crisis, and it's not appropriate for me to say, you're in this crisis when you're about to be evicted, and I'm going to pull out this person-centered tool and I'm going to it's like, no, that's not appropriate, honestly, at this moment. And so I think for me, I think sometimes what can happen with these frameworks and these tools, it's everything. It's everything, and it's all everything that we have, and we stick with it. But I think with that, it depends can really help with the nuance and figuring out what a person needs, and figuring out, is this the right moment to bring out a tool or a template, because it doesn't fit all the time. So I think for me, to your question, really, like, it depends on the person. Like I mentioned in that one example, I was in contact with a family in many conversations, and so there was a positive impact from that tool. And sometimes I don't hear back from people. So it's just kind of one of those, it depends.
Thanks for sharing, Nora.
I'll respond pretty quick. When we do our Good Life groups, or when I've done individual tools with people, we of course follow up and say, and we try to end our Good Life groups with, what's maybe your next step or intention. And then so we want to then follow up with that knowledge of, hey, did you share this with, your case manager? Did you share this with your school team? And if so, how did it go? And I don't have data about this in front of me, and so I'm kind of going from memory and gut here, but I would say like 2/3 of the time it's a positive experience. And a lot of this relates back to what Nora is saying. Like, we can't get our needs met if we're not clearly communicating them. And this is a way for us to identify our needs and clearly communicate them. And so in general, the reception and the outcome is a positive one. But of course, there are times that professionals don't necessarily, embrace something that's not always true, or that a family is maybe too uncertain to share what they've done as well.
Thank you. The hour flew by. I actually have a question, but it's 1:00 and I respect people's time, so I might email it to you. It's just a couple of questions about, I'll tell you what they are so you can think about it, is what might be an interesting topic that would be helpful for you for April. Our next session is April 22nd. The other one is additional support or resources that might help you as you're implementing these Charting Life Course framework in your role, and for those of you who are newer at it, what might help you. And so I'll just email you those questions, and if you're inclined to send us an email back, that would be great, because it's helping us. We're planning we're building this as we go, and so we want to make sure it's useful to people, and we can get some good discussions going and think about creative ways we can build Charting the Life Course in Minnesota. So thank you for coming today. We appreciate it. And thank you to Nora and Jamie for being willing to share how you've been using it. And we will touch base again we'll have another meeting in April. And in the meantime, we do have a little planning group that is thinking about how we're building this life course in action and this community of practice. And so if you're interested in participating in those meetings, let me know and I'll make sure you get an invitation.